Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, let me welcome the new president of the Barbados Hotel and Tourism Association. I apologize for being a few minutes late. I was trying to resolve a matter for two people, one of which involves cricket tomorrow. And I know that there would be no forgiving if that was not done. Secondly, let me also welcome a titan of the labor movement, Sir Roy Trotman. Sir Roy, your spirit was here, even if not your body, over the course of the multiple meetings that we had. And I'm also seeing a former head of the private sector joining us on that side of the table too. So I'd like to thank all of you for being here this morning. I've invited two persons when we get into the substance of it. The country representative for the Inter-American Development Bank. As you know, I would have met earlier this week with the president of the IDB, Mr. Luis Alberto Moreno, who we are very grateful for his visit and his commitment to Barbados as we go through these difficult times. But we are conscious that we have a loan portfolio of 191 million US dollars, of which 135 million US dollars remains undisbursed. That Barbados's disbursement rate is at about 13% a year, when Jamaica's is 32%. And worse than that, that we would have cancelled 5 loans in 2016-2017, and that does not include the one that hurt me the most when it was cancelled in 2013, which we returned 48 of 60 million in the housing neighborhood upgrade program that would have seen an improvement in the lives of the people of Greenfield, Cat's Castle, Allen View, and the Garden Land. Something has to be fundamentally wrong when a project is entered in 2015, November, for 25 million US for roads that all of us are complaining about, and we've only spent 300,000 US in the last 2.5 years. Something has to be fundamentally wrong when we have a project for strengthening human and social development for 10 million US, entered almost 2 years ago, and we've only spent less than $1 million US. So that we have to recognize that to say that a project unit is understaffed and needs 2 or 3 people in a public service of 25,000 or 24,000 is the ultimate insult to the people of Barbados. And to say that we can't get something done because of procurement issues is to suggest that people have a different agenda from that which the legislation requires of us in the resolution of procurement issues. I believe, and it was in this room, that we announced to the world that our debt is unsustainable and that we have to take certain steps to be able to correct it. If concessional funding is available at the level and at the rates at which it is available, and we are now so great, to use a good old-time Bajan word, or so reckless that we cannot make use of that which has been the result of months of negotiation and work for the purposes for which it was intended, then we have to check ourselves about what mission we're on. I'm conscious that our actions have also had implications for the private sector. And to that extent, the reason why I've really asked Juan Carlos to come at some point this morning too, before we get into the rest of our agenda, is to be able to speak to the bank's private sector arm. I know, Mr. Herbert, that you and a few others will know of it, but in my view, it is going to become all the more critical along with the other private sector arms of the World Bank, for example, and the extent to which you can leverage also borrowing out of CAF, because the decisions that we've taken nationally will have implications for all of us. And therefore, your government will do whatever is necessary to make sure that you all have access to funding. As I indicated yesterday to the country, next week I start to shift towards literally looking at investments and unlocking investments, because growth is what it is all about, even as we continue to make sure that the bleeding stops fully. And without our path to growth, all of this will be a useless exercise. I've also asked, and at the right time it will be a confidential briefing, for Mr. Malalu to come, because as I said when I shared it with the managing director of the International Monetary Fund last week, she did this, and I said, well, I thought I was the only body who used to knock wood. And we both agreed that it is better to be born lucky than to be born rich. And hopefully you will begin to understand why I'm going to need the efforts of everyone in this room to make sure that when manna from heaven does present itself, it does not go abroad, literally. So I say all of that, but what I really want to end by saying is what I should have started by saying. I want to thank you. And I want to thank you because the only reason we are where we are today is because of the collective purpose that we were able to come together with from the very first morning of government. When I met with the IMF Managing Director last week, there is no doubt in their mind that the combination of the massive mandate of the people of Barbados, but more importantly, the collective purpose of the social partnership, has them in no doubt that Barbados, acting with the singular focus that it is, deserves and merits whatever, I don't want to use the word assistance because that's not quite it, but whatever flexibility in terms of engaging urgently with discussions that we request. And I'm grateful for that engagement, because we all know that if we were ever to be on a trajectory, or if we end up on a trajectory of 9 to 12 months to settle a program, which is the standard, that it would not bode well for our own circumstances. And therefore, to the extent that, and I want to contextualize it because sometimes it's difficult to believe, especially since today is only 4 weeks since the result of the people, that when I spoke in this room after we met the day, that the first person to speak after us announcing that we could not pay our debts was Madame Lagarde. She didn't send the mission chief, and she didn't hide behind the institution. She spoke within an hour of us saying to the international capital markets that we were suspending debt payments. Within 48 hours of the budget being delivered, she indicated that she was prepared to see us the next day, and hence my having, regrettably, to leave BHTA's luncheon, having spoken to go to the airport to meet with her. She had already by then dispatched the team to Barbados within 72 hours of the first conversation to do a fact-finding mission. And she had already had discussions on our behalf with the British and Canadians, the development ministers, particularly as it relates also to our sewage issues, which continue to be difficult for us to resolve. She would have had discussions last Friday after I met with her on Thursday evening, and the governor's here, yes, and the DFE and Ambassador Maskell, and we met with the British Executive Director as well as the US Executive Director and some officials from Treasury, and of course separately we met with Madame Lagarde and her entire senior management team. and then we met with the person in charge of the Western Hemisphere after separately. The bottom line is, that not only are they satisfied that we are on the right track, they believe that they could come back here very quickly, and hence the 2nd to the 12th of July. I'll share one aspect when the camera is off with you after. And hence, our team, having had a few days, 2 or 3 days rest, are back at it again, because you cannot ask people to come to you quickly and then you're not ready. So I think this evening the team resumes. They met earlier this week. The numbers are being done. The medium-term financial strategy is being compiled now, as well as the medium-term development strategy, effectively the BERT program, fleshing it out beyond the budget where we started. The model in the central bank, the numbers are being populated. This afternoon we meet again at 4:30, I believe. I've had to push it back in order to be able to go through all of the numbers and the assumptions, because Cabinet must, by next Thursday, approve a draft framework for negotiations. And that therefore means that we're flat out between now and Thursday again trying to get this, because you cannot ask people to treat to you with a level of seriousness and urgency and you're not ready. And as I've said, Barbados must distinguish itself. Even if we don't have the money, we must be absolutely and utterly professional in all that we do in our discussions with the team, because we need the benefit of the doubt, believe you me, with respect to the kind of program that we want to do. We've taken a non-traditional approach thus far in terms of our expenditure review. Tourism, I thank you. I know that you are coming at me with some things, but I'm saying to you, let the measures start to work. We are not mad people, but let us start gathering the data. What we cannot have, and I want to put it in context, because my Minister of Tourism is out. He's been meeting with different people. He had good meetings with American Airlines yesterday. He's had good meetings with IATA. They want the legislation urgently. Of course, nobody likes additional fees or taxes. But what are we not doing? Mr. Herbert, you would recall that I put on the table 15% for VAT on the accommodation sector. And the tourism sector said, do not do that to us before January 2020. So we can't both have what we want and then want to ignore what we ask for. And I ask us, therefore, to recognize that in most other countries, these kinds of measures would have triggered massive social unrest. It will be uncomfortable for some. We're not going to have persons with water bills who have a leak paying 50%, companies paying 50% of a bill that is full of leaks. That's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to be fair. Equally, we've taken off the 2/3 sewage connection fee for those in Bridgetown on the South Coast and replaced it with a fee that is to be carried by the entire country and not just a few. So we accept that there are some teething issues, but we will get them right. We've heard those in the minibus sector, and they've met with the Minister of Public Transport already. I intend to meet with them as they've requested. But we have to recognize that we're not here because we want to be here. We are here because, and the numbers are close to DFE now to $1.9 billion. We are almost $1.9 billion in arrears. And what I've asked for, and that's why the process is taking so long, is that when the numbers are put in by Central Bank and Ambassador Maskell and all of these guys in the model, I'm not putting in the numbers that passed in the estimates in April, because those numbers in the estimates don't have the right number for UE, they don't have the right number for the hospital, they don't have the right number for the Water Authority, they don't have the right number for a whole host of institutions. as a form of political and financial cosmetology. And we are not going to get out of this by pretending that we live in an alternative reality. We have to put all of the numbers, and PS Finance is getting them equally. We have to have the best assumptions on revenue, and that is why Ms. Sivers is here, for us to get it. And we have to be prepared to tweak and move if we have to. And that's why this commitment to meet twice a month with you is so absolutely critical. And I end by saying that two things. One, that it is difficult. There's no doubt. But let us also understand how blessed we are. Let us understand that for a country to have the ear and action of both the managing director of the IMF as well as the presence of the president of the Inter-American Development Bank within less than 1 week, in less than 4 weeks from an election. So, Roy, you have been in these things longer than I am, but that is highly unusual in my 29 years of public life. So we've been blessed, and I don't accept that it is me or my government alone. It is us. It is the example of a country acting in unison and not singing in harmony. Secondly, that the people of Barbados are happy with the example that they're seeing from us. And to that extent, therefore, that after we have the initial briefings from our guests, our ability to continue with our agenda, which requires a consultation on the continued areas of expenditure review, continued areas of competitiveness that we have to address, and other aspects of economic policy, including enfranchisement. That is to be the subject of discussion in here first, and then the country after. So the people of Barbados have been saying all over where we go that they want, especially, I suspect because also of the type of victory that we've had, that this is the kind of governance that they want for us to continue, and that it is therefore a mandate not only for my government, but it is a mandate for each of you as members of the social partnership to accept that the governance, not the government, but the governance of the country is best when we act as we are acting in this room.